We live in a time where evil no longer hides in the shadows. It walks boldly into our homes through screens, it speaks through polished lips, and it dresses itself in charm and charisma. The most dangerous people are not the ones who raise their voices, but the ones who smile while they twist the truth. This isn't a matter of suspicion or paranoia. This is about discernment, real, spirit-born discernment that separates light from darkness, truth from lies, sheep from wolves. You see, the enemy doesn't come dressed in red with a pitchfork. He comes quoting scripture, offering help, pretending to care. And unless your eyes are open, unless your heart is grounded in truth, you will be deceived. Today, we're not just going to talk about evil as a concept. We're going to confront the chilling reality that evil often looks good, feels right, even sounds holy. But behind the mask is corruption, manipulation, and destruction. And if you can't recognize it, you'll follow it. Evil doesn't always come as a loud, raging force. It doesn't always appear violent, grotesque, or obviously threatening. In fact, the most dangerous evil often wears a friendly face. It hides behind charm, politeness, and even acts of kindness. This is the very reason so many people fall into its trap. It doesn't look like a threat. It looks like a friend. It looks helpful, generous, even noble. But underneath that pleasant exterior lies a heart set on manipulation, control, and destruction. This kind of evil is subtle. It whispers instead of shouts. It flatters instead of warns. And by the time it's done with you, the damage is deep and often permanent. One of the greatest deceptions of our age is the belief that evil is easy to recognize. We've been conditioned by movies, media, and culture to expect evil to come with a certain appearance. Dark clothing, sinister laughter, violent outbursts. But real evil, especially the kind that thrives in personal relationships and social systems, rarely shows its true colors at first. It's polished, it's intelligent, it knows exactly what to say to win trust. It plays the long game. This is why so many people find themselves betrayed, manipulated, and broken, because they never expected evil to come wearing a smile. This type of evil doesn't force itself into your life with threats. It gains access through affection. It builds a reputation of being helpful, generous, and trustworthy. It says all the right things, does all the right deeds, but its motives are entirely self-serving. It will pretend to care about you, but only as long as you serve a purpose. The moment you outlive your usefulness or you stand in its way, the mask begins to slip. And then you see what was always there: selfishness, pride, and a complete lack of empathy. But by that time, it's already done its work. That's how evil functions when it wears a friendly face. It disarms you before it devours you. Sometimes evil people will attach themselves to the vulnerable. They'll seek out those who are lonely, hurt, or unsure of themselves. Why? Because it's easier to gain control when someone is in need. They offer support, encouragement, and protection at first, but only to create a dependency. Slowly, they begin to shape the way you think, the way you feel, even the way you see yourself. They don't need to raise their voice to dominate you. They just need to get close enough to your heart. And once they're there, they begin to twist your reality. You start questioning your worth, your instincts, even your sanity. That's the power of evil that hides behind a gentle appearance. It's important to understand that friendliness is not the same as goodness. There are people who smile often, speak softly, and show outward kindness, but inside they are driven by envy, pride, and selfish ambition. They'll give you advice that sounds wise but is rooted in manipulation. They'll support your dreams only when those dreams benefit them. They'll even apologize when they're caught just to preserve their image. And when someone tries to expose them, they'll turn the story around, play the victim, and accuse others of being harsh or judgmental. It's all a game, a performance designed to protect their power. This is why discernment is so critical. You can't afford to judge a person solely by how they appear or how they make you feel in the moment. Feelings can be manipulated, appearances can be deceiving, but patterns don't lie. Over time, evil reveals itself in patterns of behavior, using people, lying, gaslighting, refusing accountability, tearing others down behind their backs. Watch for the fruit, not the performance. Watch how they treat those they can't gain from. Watch how they respond to correction, how they handle being told no. The truth is always in the fruit. Evil with a friendly face is still evil. In many ways, it's worse because it's harder to detect. It invades lives quietly and leaves a trail of confusion and brokenness. And the only way to guard yourself against it is to walk in wisdom, grounded in truth. You need to be slow to trust appearances and quick to test character. Not everyone who seems kind is good. Not everyone who speaks softly is safe. If you aren't careful, you'll mistake poison for medicine. And by the time you realize it, the damage may already be done. Deception rarely comes in the form of an obvious lie. If it did, most people would reject it without hesitation. But when deception is dressed up as truth, when it sounds right, feels right, and even uses the right language, it becomes incredibly dangerous. That's how evil works, not by openly opposing the truth, but by twisting it just enough to keep people blind, comfortable, and ultimately under control. It doesn't seek to destroy truth outright. It seeks to distort it, just enough to lead you off the path without you noticing you've strayed. This is why discernment is not a luxury, it's a necessity. In a world where people can manipulate language, emotions, and even spiritual language to their advantage, those without a firm foundation will be swept away. Evil doesn't mind quoting the truth as long as it can bend it to serve its purpose. It will take good words and good ideas and use them to build trust. It will say what people want to hear, not because it believes in those words, but because it knows how to weaponize them. It uses truth like bait, but the hook underneath is always control, pride, or self-gain. There are people who will twist morality to fit their own desires. They will redefine kindness so that it means us never questioning them. They will redefine love so that it means accepting all their actions without resistance. They will redefine humility so that it means that are challenging their authority. And they do this not by shouting down the truth, but by replacing it slowly, carefully with counterfeits. They create a version of truth that flatters them, that protects their ego, and that justifies their actions. And because it still uses familiar words and concepts, most people don't recognize it for what it really is: deception disguised as truth. Some of the most dangerous individuals are those who speak with conviction and confidence while subtly altering the meaning of what's right. They appear wise, thoughtful, and even spiritual. But listen closely. Over time, the message shifts from truth to manipulation. Instead of confronting sin, they excuse it. Instead of teaching responsibility, they promote victimhood. Instead of encouraging accountability, they punish anyone who challenges them. And the worst part is that many of them genuinely believe they are doing what is right. That's the terrifying nature of deception. It doesn't just fool others. It often fools the one doing the deceit. This is especially true when someone uses partial truth. Partial truth is one of evil's favorite tools because it creates just enough credibility to draw people in. It starts with something real, something trustworthy, but it never ends there. It adds just a bit of poison, just a slight twist, until the original meaning is lost. And because people heard something familiar or comforting, they assume the whole message must be safe. But what they're really doing is building their lives on a lie disguised as wisdom. In relationships, this form of deception can be incredibly destructive. A manipulative person may say things like, I only want what's best for you, or I'm just being honest, or you're overreacting. Phrases that sound reasonable on the surface, but are often used to silence, control, or gaslight. They use truth like a shield to defend their behavior. And when questioned, they claim to be misunderstood or attacked. This makes the person on the receiving end feel guilty, confused, or even ashamed for seeing the red flags. That's the power of deception wrapped in truth. It doesn't just change how you see the other person, it changes how you see yourself. Evil loves to play the role of the wise advisor, the humble leader, the concerned friend. But its goal isn't truth, it's influence. And influence gained through deceit will always lead to destruction. It may take time. It may come slowly. But eventually, the lies start to unravel, the contradictions become clear, and the damage becomes undeniable. And when that moment comes, many people look back and wonder how they didn't see it sooner. The answer is simple. They weren't lied to directly. They were fed truth that had been taken. This is why it's so important to test everything, not by how it makes you feel, but by what it produces. Does it bring clarity or confusion, freedom or control, conviction or manipulation? The truth always leads to light. It exposes, it purifies, and it sets people free. Deception, even when coated in truth, leads to shadows. It hides, it twists, and it binds. And if you don't learn to recognize the difference, you'll find yourself following something that feels right, but leads far from what is true. You can only pretend for so long. Sooner or later, what's inside a person comes out. No matter how polished their words are, no matter how well they craft their image, their actions will eventually reveal who they really are. That's why the fruit reveals the root. You don't need to be a prophet to spot evil. You just need to pay attention to the pattern of someone's life. A healthy tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a corrupt tree cannot bear good fruit. It's a principle as old as time. The outward fruit is always evidence of the inward root. It's easy to be fooled by appearances. Some people are incredibly skilled at saying the right things, especially when they know they're being watched. They know how to play the part. They know how to show up in the right places, act humble, sound wise, and appear trustworthy. But the truth about someone isn't found in their moments of performance. It's found in the trail they leave behind. Look at how they treat people when no one's watching. Look at how they speak about others when it's just the two of you. Look at how they respond when they don't get their way. That's where the root shows. If someone constantly leaves people drained, confused, hurt, or anxious, that's not an accident. That's fruit. If they're always the center of drama, always shifting blame, always playing the victim while others suffer, that's not just a coincidence. It's a pattern. And patterns don't lie. They may explain it away, spiritualize it, or twist the narrative to make themselves look like the misunderstood hero, but over time their fruit tells the truth. And if the fruit is bitter, rotten, or poisonous, it points back to a root problem, a corrupted character, a selfish heart, or an unchecked heart. One of the great dangers in our culture today is the tendency to separate who a person claims to be from how they consistently live. We excuse bad behavior because we're impressed with someone's words or their charisma or their talent, but someone can talk about grace and still be filled with pride. They can teach about love and still be cold, manipulative, or cruel. They can preach about humility while demanding control behind closed doors. That's the deception of image. It can make evil look like virtue for a while, but again, the fruit will expose the root. This is especially important when dealing with people in leadership or influence. The higher the platform, the easier it becomes to mask the root. But if you want to know who a leader really is, don't just listen to their sermons or speeches. Look at the condition of the people around them. Are they thriving or surviving? Are they free or fearful? Do they grow under that person's influence, or do they shrink? Because true leaders, people with good roots, produce fruit in others. They leave a trail of healing, not hurt. They build up, they don't tear down, they inspire growth, not fear. If the people closest to someone are walking on eggshells, something is wrong, no matter how impressive the person may seem. Another key sign is how a person responds to correction. A good tree welcomes pruning. It makes it stronger, healthier. But a corrupt tree resists it, fights it, or pretends to accept it while plotting revenge. When someone can't admit fault, can't take responsibility, and always finds a way to shift the blame, watch out. That's not just a flaw, that's fruit. And it reveals a root that is rooted in pride, insecurity, and often deception. A person with a good heart may stumble, but they'll repent. A person with a bad root will stumble and then lie about it and justify it and blame you for noticing. This principle applies in every area of life. Relationships, work, community, even faith. You may not know everything about a person's background, their theology, or their intentions, but if you watch long enough, you will see the fruit. It's not about being judgmental. It's about being wise. Fruit doesn't lie. It either nourishes or poisons. It either brings life or slowly steals it. And when you start to feel that something is off, don't ignore it. Don't be so blinded by someone's charm, gifting, or words that you overlook the evidence right in front of you. Eventually, the fruit will show you what the root really is. Always. Emotions are powerful. They can move us, guide us, and even warn us when something is wrong. But emotions were never meant to be the foundation for truth. The problem arises when people rely on how they feel instead of what is true, when they follow their heart instead of using discernment. This is one of the most dangerous traps when it comes to identifying evil. Evil often knows exactly how to appeal to your emotions. It knows how to make you feel seen, heard, and valued. It knows how to create an emotional bond that feels real, even when everything behind it is false. And if you're not careful, you'll end up trusting someone simply because of how they made you feel, rather than who they truly are. Evil thrives in emotional environments where truth has been pushed aside. It feeds off moments where logic is suspended and feelings take over. A manipulative person doesn't need to argue facts. They just need to stir your emotions. They might make you feel guilty for questioning them, ashamed for setting boundaries, or even afraid to speak up. They know that once they have your emotions, they have you. Because people will often protect the very person who is hurting them if that person has made them feel emotionally dependent. That's why discernment is so critical. It cuts through emotion and looks at reality. It's not cold or unfeeling. It simply refuses to be blinded by momentary affection or discernment asks the hard questions even when it's uncomfortable. It doesn't ignore red flags just because someone has a good heart or a sad story. It doesn't excuse harmful behavior because someone once helped you or made you feel special. Discernment forces you to step back and evaluate what is actually happening here. What is this person consistently doing? How do they treat others? What is the outcome of being close to them? You can't answer those questions with emotion. You answer them by stepping outside of your feelings and seeing the bigger picture. And that's exactly what evil wants you to avoid. The truth is, evil often targets people who lead with their heart. Not because being kind or empathetic is wrong, but because when those qualities are not rooted in wisdom, they become weaknesses that can be exploited. A deceiver will flatter your compassion, praise your patience, and celebrate your loyalty until all those traits are being used to keep you silent, confused, and controlled. You might think you're loving them by staying quiet or giving them another chance, but love without truth is not love. Mercy without discernment leads to destruction. And sooner or later, if you don't wake up, your kindness becomes the very thing that keeps you in bondage. It's important to understand that not every strong feeling is a sign of truth. Just because someone makes you feel inspired, loved, or emotionally charged doesn't mean they are good. Feelings can be manipulated. You can cry during a speech or feel deeply connected to a person and still be wrong about their character. That's why discernment is not about being cynical or hard-hearted. It's about being anchored in something deeper than emotion, anchored in truth, in scripture, in reality, in history. Discernment protects your heart, not by shutting it down, but by grounding it. Many people who fall under the influence of evil don't do so because they are weak or foolish. They do so because they trusted their emotions above everything else. They ignored the signs because they didn't feel in danger. They dismissed concerns because they didn't feel angry or mistreated. But emotions are not always accurate indicators of truth. Sometimes the most dangerous situations are the ones that feel peaceful on the surface. Sometimes the greatest manipulators are the ones who never raise their voice. And if you base your judgment on feeling alone, you'll mistake a storm for calm. Discernment over emotion doesn't mean you stop feeling. It means you stop following your feelings as if they are always right. You begin to test your emotions with truth. You begin to ask, is this feeling leading me to freedom or confusion, to growth or control, to clarity or emotional dependence? And if your feelings are drawing you deeper into something toxic, you don't silence your discernment. You listen to it. You lean into wisdom, because evil wants you emotional, not discerning. It wants you overwhelmed, not observant. But once you stop letting your emotions lead, once you start letting truth take the wheel, you become much harder to deceive. And evil loses its power over you. There is a moment in every encounter with evil where you are faced with a decision to speak or to stay silent. And far too often, people choose silence. They tell themselves it's not their place, that they don't want to judge, that it's safer to stay out of it. But silence in the face of evil is not neutrality. It is complicity. When you see wrong and do nothing, when you hear lies and remain quiet, when you watch someone suffer under manipulation or abuse and turn your eyes away, you become a part of the problem. Evil doesn't just grow because of wicked people doing wicked things. It grows because good people say nothing. This silence is often disguised as wisdom or humility. People say things like, it's not my business, or and I don't know the full story, or and want to show grace. And while discernment and patience are important, they are not an excuse for cowardice. There is a time to wait and pray, but there is also a time to speak and act. Evil counts on your hesitation. It relies on your fear of conflict. It thrives in environments where people are too polite or too passive to resist it. Every time you choose silence when you should speak, you create space for evil to operate unchecked. What many fail to understand is that evil doesn't need everyone to support it. It just needs enough people to look the other way. It doesn't need a crowd of accomplices. It just needs a crowd of quiet observers. The more people stay silent, the bolder evil becomes. It takes silence as permission. And once it knows no one will challenge it, it moves freely, harming, manipulating, lying, controlling, until it leaves behind a trail of destruction. History is filled with examples of atrocities that could have been prevented if someone had simply spoken up, but people didn't. They waited. They hoped someone else would take a stand. They chose peace over truth, comfort over conviction. Silence is often rooted in fear of rejection, fear of backlash, fear of being misunderstood. But courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to do what is right, even when fear is present. If you wait to feel brave before you speak up, you'll likely never do it. But if you believe that truth is more important than comfort, if you care more about what is right than what is easy, then you'll find your voice. And when you use your voice not to tear down, but to expose what is harmful, you become a light in the darkness, a light that evil can't manipulate, a light that others can. Sometimes silence comes from a desire to keep peace. You don't want to rock the boat. You don't want to make things worse. But the peace that is built on silence in the face of evil is not true peace. It's a cover-up. It's a fragile illusion that benefits only the oppressor. Real peace is built on truth and justice. And sometimes, to get to peace, you have to go through conflict. You have to be willing to disrupt the status quo. You have to be willing to challenge what is wrong, even if it makes people uncomfortable. Because the only thing worse than evil itself is a community that sees it and says no. In personal relationships, this plays out in quiet tolerance of mistreatment. Someone sees manipulation, gaslighting, or emotional abuse, but says nothing. They don't want to seem accusatory or overreactive, so they let it slide, hoping it will go away. But it doesn't. It grows. It deepens. And over time, the one being hurt begins to believe that no one sees them, that no one will speak up for them. Silence isolates the victim and empowers the abuser. But one voice, just one, can break that power. One person willing to say, "This isn't right," can open the door to truth, to healing. Silence is not always passive. Sometimes it's a choice to protect oneself at the cost of others. And that kind of silence becomes a betrayal. Evil doesn't always look like cruelty. It can look like apathy, like indifference, like polite avoidance. But if you love truth, if you value justice, if you care about people, you cannot remain silent when it matters most. You may lose comfort, popularity, or even relationships, but you will keep your integrity. And more importantly, you will stand on the side. The world doesn't just need more good people. It needs more good people who are willing to speak, who are willing to stand, who understand that silence in the presence of evil is not love, it is surrender. And if enough of us find the courage to stop being silent, evil will lose its place to hide. So now you've seen it. Evil isn't always loud. It isn't always dressed in darkness. Sometimes it comes softly, wrapped in charm, quoting truth, stirring your emotions, hiding behind a mask of goodness. But if you have eyes to see, you'll recognize it, not by its words, but by its fruit. Not by how it makes you feel, but by what it produces. It twists truth, manipulates hearts, poisons environments, and thrives in silence. And the only thing that can stand against it is truth. Spoken boldly, lived faithfully, and held tightly in the face of deceit. You cannot afford to be passive. You cannot afford to be easily impressed. You must be rooted, anchored, and discerning. You must be the kind of person who sees beyond the surface, who isn't swayed by emotional flattery, and who has the courage to speak when silence would be easier. Evil wants a quiet world, a world where no one questions, no one resists, no one exposes. But not today, not here, not you. Stand, speak, discern. Because when truth rises, evil runs. And when light shines, darkness has nowhere.